I just finished reading this book, Get Off Your Assets: A Woman's Guide to Avoid Getting Screwed in Your Gray Divorce by Neale Godfrey. Here are my takeaways. Welcome and welcome back. Thank you for supporting my channel. A couple of weeks ago, I presented the top 5 personal finance books that helped to shape my retirement. Well, while I was in the library searching for these books so that I could review them, I found a few other interesting books, including this one, and I was intrigued by the title. Now, you may be saying, Aja, what does that book have to do with you? Are you getting a divorce? No, but I am nosy, and I wanted to find out what this means, gray divorce. And I'm glad I did, because I learned that this book is not only useful to someone getting a gray divorce, but it could also be very helpful to someone planning retirement or someone who's in the early years of their retirement, like I am. What is gray divorce? Gray divorce is when a couple who are age 50 or older gets a divorce after decades of marriage. And surprisingly, the author says that the divorce rate among people in this age group has doubled since 1990, and it's tripled for couples 65 and older. So I was very surprised by that. The purpose of this book is to educate women on what to do with their finances before, during, and after a great divorce. And the book was published just recently, this year in June of 2025. So, who is the author? Neale Godfrey. Right here it says that she's a New York Times #1 best-selling author, but she is so much more than that. So this lady was one of the very first female bank executives in the 1970s and became the president and CEO of the first women's bank. She has written a lot of books teaching parents and children about money. And she's been on TV regularly, like on Good Morning America and Oprah. So, what was my experience reading this book? Honestly, it wasn't the smoothest read for me. This book was written by an older woman for older women. And so some of the jokes fell flat for me. And some of the terms she uses, I had to think back to watching Happy Days, because she terms like when she says his new squeeze, using the word squeeze like that. I think watching Happy Days was the last time I heard that term used in that way. Another thing is that even though this book is very, very thoroughly researched and it's filled with a lot of citations and quotes, the quotes started to become a bit much for me. It's kind of like there's a quote on every page. This lady is quoting everybody from Benjamin Franklin to Gandhi to Jackie Joyner Kersee, and it gets a little bit tired for me after a while. But anyway, that's all just my opinion on how, what my preference for reading is. It doesn't take away from the importance and value of this book. So the first part, what to do before your great divorce, talks about how, well, it first starts off talking about the reasons why couples are divorcing so much, because this rate is just going up and up. And, so it gives different reasons on the personal level of why people want to do this, and societal level, how society has changed and made it more possible and acceptable to divorce at this age. And it points out how women are particularly vulnerable financially in a situation like this because of a lack of knowledge and experience in handling finances, I guess, in that age group, because of growing up with certain values and stereotypes that men are supposed to handle the finances. And I found that really surprising because that was not my experience growing up. My parents weren't the most communicative about finances, but I did see much more cooperation happening between them than what's described in this book. So I'm not sure if it's a generational thing or it was just the personal experience that I had, or maybe just my own perspective on what I was seeing. But I found it very surprising that this is such a widespread thing. But the thing in this section that got my attention the most was when this author described how before 1973, before something called the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, women couldn't apply for a loan without a male cosigner. And I had been exposed to this fact while watching a docudrama about Mrs. Fields, the lady who sold cookies, because that was her situation, that she needed her husband's help with her business. She couldn't just own it on her own. But the way that this author presents what was going on at that time with not just this the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, but several other financial milestones that happen for women. Before all of those things happened, it was kind of shocking how disenfranchised women were from being in control of their own money. And it really helped me to understand how only very recently women have become more financially literate and empowered. Another thing that really surprised me in this section is that common law marriage is just as legally binding, and you would need to go through the same exact divorce process depending on what state you're in. That was very, very surprising. I did not know that. And this section finishes off by the author walking through all the steps of a divorce, from separation to settlement to trial. So in the second section, which is mostly about during the divorce, the author is recommending that the person getting the great divorce first start by finding out their own relationship with money. So she offers a series of quizzes and questions to ask yourself to find out what is she calls it your financial personality, I think she called it. And then also during this time is when the woman should start retitling things, putting things into her name that need to be in her name, start separating out what's hers, what's his, update beneficiary lists, notify important entities like the IRS and any creditors of the pending divorce. And it's in this section that she recommends that the woman getting the great divorce starts creating a real budget by tracking her expenses very carefully. And this budget will be what's presented during the court proceedings, so that in the end, she winds up with the right amount of income to cover her bills, because the author gives examples of how this has failed, where if you don't carefully give a realistic budget, if you don't carefully create a realistic budget, then you come out shortchanged in the end. And then you wind up not being able to pay your bills. And so I think this section could also be very helpful to an early retiree like me, especially the parts about making sure your beneficiaries are updated and creating a log tracking all of your spending. And so when I was reading that section about tracking spending, it kind of confirmed for me that I'm on the right track with how I have been keeping track of my expenses. And it even gave me some vocabulary that I could use that would better serve me in thinking about my budget, my monthly budget. So she talks about fixed expenses versus variable expenses, and how it's much more easy to control your variable expenses like food, entertainment, and utilities, and how it's much easier to lower those expenses than your fixed expenses, such as mortgage and insurance payments. And in the second section, the author breaks down how a FICO score is calculated, how lenders use debt to income ratio, and some really good strategies for improving your credit score. There were also two really good chapters in this book that talked about choosing the right team of trustworthy attorneys and advisors who will speak on your behalf and keep your best interests at the forefront. And another chapter that was really relevant in this section for someone who is planning or in early retirement is one discussing Social Security, life insurance, health insurance, long-term health care, pension plans, retirement accounts, and taxes. So the third and final section of the book is about what to do after your great divorce. And it has a lot of focus on tackling debt. And there's a big topic addressed here, which is the pros and cons and the impact of refinancing or taking out a reverse mortgage on your home. The sentence in this entire book that resonated with me the most was when she said, retirement means downsizing. She really encourages getting rid of the big house, which she considers a money pit, in addition to a lot of other unnecessary possessions, such as the car, if you're not using it or if you don't need it on a daily basis. The author continues this section by teaching the details of how to get started investing and encouraging women that they can learn and they can do just as good of a job investing as men can do. And there's also a chapter about the importance of putting a prenup in place if you are considering remarrying and how to broach that uncomfortable topic with your partner. And the book concludes with advice for passing on positive money culture to your children and grandchildren so that when they inherit your money, they won't go and spend it on sports cars and, all kinds of other extravagant things, but they will have value. They'll have the same values of money that you have instilled in them. So again, this book is not only valuable for people going through a great divorce, but I find it really useful for anyone who would like to know more about taking control of their money and wants to build their financial literacy, especially for people like me who are in the early years of retirement over the age of 50. To find this and similar books, look for this section in your local library, 332.024. That Dewey Decimal number will lead you to the personal finance section. If you found this video useful, please give it a like and consider subscribing if you'd like to continue following my early retirement journey as it unfolds. Also, please share it with anyone else who might be interested. Thank you. Stay inspired and keep thriving.